The Seeds of Doom was first broadcast from the 31st of January to the 6th of March 1976, bringing Doctor Who's 13th season to a close. Part 5 gained the lowest viewing figures of 9.9 million, but Part 6 gained the highest figures of 11.5 million. The story originally intended to conclude Doctor Who's 13th season was The Hand of Fear, at that stage a 6-part story from the writing team of Bob Baker and Dave Martin. Baker and Martin submitted their idea to script editor Robert Holmes on May 29, 1975, and were commissioned to write Serial 4L on June 20th. A week later, director Douglas Camfield was contracted to work on the story. Camfield had recently completed the season premiere Terror of the Zygons. As development continued on the scripts for The Hand of Fear, however, producer Philip Hinchcliffe became increasingly worried that there were too many problems with the serial to be resolved before it entered production. Holmes had been preoccupied with rewrites on The Brain of Morbius, but by late September had come to share Hinchcliffe's misgivings. Feeling that there was no way that The Hand of Fear could be broadcast as a 6-part story, Hinchcliffe and Holmes requested permission from head of drama Bill Slater to pair 2 installments off season 13 so that Baker and Martin's story could be redefined into a 4-episode serial. This was refused, so instead Holmes turned to his friend Robert Banks Stewart to provide a backup 6-part adventure in case The Hand of Fear proved unsalvageable. Stewart, who had previously written Terror of the Zygons, was commissioned on September 30th for a serial entitled The Seeds of Doom. The Seeds of Doom drew heavily on the Quatermass Experiment, Nigel Kneale's landmark 1953 television serial about an astronaut who transforms into a plant creature due to an alien infection. For the last time in the 1970s, The Seeds of Doom also incorporated the involvement of UNIT, the United Nations Intelligence Task Force. The organisation had been a Doctor Who fixture since 1968's The Invasion, and had played a key role during John Pertwee's tenure as the Doctor, but had been slowly phased out since Hinchcliffe and Holmes took the reins of the programme. The task force's loss of prominence was particularly apparent in the omission of any of the regular UNIT characters. Instead, the roles normally filled by Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart and Sergeant Benton were given to 2 new characters, Major Beresford and Sergeant Henderson. Stewart delivered his scripts for The Seeds of Doom very rapidly, and to the approval of Hinchcliffe and Holmes. The Hand of Fear was therefore dropped from the schedule on October 14th, and The Seeds of Doom became the new Serial 4L. A 4-part version of The Hand of Fear would eventually be transmitted during season 14. Unfortunately, not long after The Seeds of Doom was greenlighted, designer Jeremy Bear fell ill after working on the Antarctic camp. Roger Murray Leach was quickly brought onto the production to replace him. As a cost-saving manoeuvre, the costume for the humanoid version of the Krynoid was adapted from an Axon outfit originally created for 1971's The Claws of Axos. Exterior work on The Seeds of Doom began on the grounds of Athelhampton House in Athelhampton, Dorset, from October 30th to November 3rd. This served as Chase's estate. Unusually, Camfield elected to record the location scenes using outside broadcast video rather than film to facilitate the special effects needed to realise the growing Krynoid. Model filming then took place on November 6 at the Ealing Television Film Studios for footage of the Krynoid and of Chase's house. Further model filming involving the Antarctic base occurred at the Puppet Theatre at BBC Television Centre. Studio recording on The Seeds of Doom followed the usual bi-weekly Monday-Tuesday pattern adopted through the 13th production block. The first of these, encompassing November 17th and 18th, were assigned to BBC Television Centre Studio 4 and involved the completion of most of episodes 1 and 2, respectively. Unfortunately, after taping concluded on the Monday, Kenneth Gilbert, playing Dunbar, discovered that he had contracted chickenpox from his daughter and would have to be absent from the set until the last of the 3 recording sessions. More misfortune occurred the following night when Michael McStay, who played Moberly, was injured in a traffic accident after leaving the studio. Taping would then resume on December 1st and 2nd, again in TC4. The first day saw the recording of the majority of Part 3, as well as Part 4 material in the Special Projects Lab. The next day concentrated on the 4th episode, in addition to scenes in the General Lab and the cottage bedroom for Part 5, and in Dunbar's office for each of the final 2 instalments. Unusually, additional OB recording was then undertaken on December 7th and 8th. The principal venue was the grounds of Buckland Sand and Cilia Company Limited in Buckland, Surrey, dressed to serve as the Antarctic exteriors. While performing the closing scene outside the TARDIS, the prop, which had been in use since Doctor Who began in 1963, collapsed on Elizabeth Sladen. Also on the 7th, the limousine chauffeur attack on the Doctor and Sarah Jane in Part 3 was taped on a country road near Betchworth in Surrey. The final studio block took place on December 15th and 16th, this time in TC8. Both Gilbert and McStay were able to rejoin the production, with the latter wearing a false beard to hide the scars he had received in the car crash. December 15 was largely devoted to episode 5, as well as some of Dunbar's scenes from the first 4 instalments. The 16th began with recording at the main entrance of BBC Television Centre itself, posing as the headquarters of the World Ecology Bureau. Moving back to TC8, Part 6 was completed, as was material in the compost crusher room for Part 4, and Episode 5 scenes in Dunbar's office and the General Lab. Work on the Seeds of Doom then wrapped up on December 19th, when special effects shots of the giant crinoid were captured in TC4. As the 13th production block concluded, Elizabeth Sladen informed Hinchcliffe of her intent to leave Doctor Who. Having spent 3 years on the programme, she was finding herself turning down increasingly attractive work, including feature films. However, Sladen did agree to remain for the first 2 serials of the next season. The broadcast of Season 13, meanwhile, concluded on March 6, 1976 with The Seeds of Doom Part 6. Once again, Doctor Who came under fire from Mary Whitehouse of the National Viewers and Listeners Association, who criticised the adventure's violent content and its inclusion of a Molotov cocktail. Seeds of Doom was Robert Banks-Stewart's final Doctor Who serial, although he would contribute ideas to The Talons of Weng-Chiang, the closing story of Season 14. Stewart would continue to work primarily in television as a writer, script editor and producer, helping to develop programmes like Shoestring, Bergerac and The Darling Buds of May. He passed away on January 14, 2016, following a battle with cancer. Serial 4L also marked the end of Douglas Camfield's long-time association with Doctor Who. Camfield did submit a story idea called The Lost Legion to Doctor Who soon after work wrapped on The Seeds of Doom, but this did not make it into production. He continued to direct episodes of shows like The Anedon Line, Shoestring and The Sweeney. Sadly, the heart ailment from which Camfield had long suffered finally took its toll on the director. He died on January 27, 1984. In Antarctica, British scientists Charles Winlet and Derek Moberly discovered a pod buried in the permafrost and take it back to their camp. John Stevenson, the base's botanist, identifies it as a vegetable-based form and estimated it has been buried in the ice for 20,000 years. In London, Richard Dunbar of the World Ecology Bureau shows the Fourth Doctor photographs of the pod at the urging of his superior, Sir Colin Thackeray. The Doctor believes it to be extraterrestrial. He tells Dunbar to tell the expedition not to touch it until he arrives. Back at the base, Stevenson discovers that the pod is growing larger, and he believes it to be absorbing ultraviolet radiation. In England, Dunbar visits the estate of millionaire Harrison Chase, who considers it his mission to protect the plant life of Mother Earth. Dunbar gives Chase the location of the pod. Chase sends his men, Scorpion and Keeler, to retrieve it. At the base, the pod opens and stings Winlet. When Stevenson and Moberly find him, Winlet's face is covered with green hives. The Doctor and Sarah arrive at the base and find that Winlet's face and body are rapidly becoming covered with green fungus. Outside the base, the Doctor uncovers another pod and notes that they travel in pairs. Winlet's blood is found to contain no blood platelets, but instead has schizophytes, microscopic organisms akin to plant bacteria. The Doctor tells Sarah that Winlet is turning into a crinoid, a galactic weed that settles on planets and eats the animal life forms. Scorby and Keeler arrive, claiming that their private plane got lost. Moberly is killed by the mutated Winlet. Transforming into a crinoid, Winlet flees the base and shelters in the outside generator hut. Scorby and Keeler steal the remaining pod, then escape in their plane. The Doctor and the others are attacked by the crinoid, which kills Stevenson. The Doctor and Sarah flee the base as a bomb set by Scorby and Keeler destroys the area. Doctor and Sarah are picked up by a team from South Bend, while Scorby and Keeler return to Chase in England with the second pod. Dunbar warns Chase that the Doctor and Sarah are still alive and are scheduled to meet with him and Sir Colin. At the meeting, the Doctor and Sarah describe the theft of the pod. He tells Dunbar to arrange for him to go to the Botanic Institute. As they leave, a driver meets them. However, the limousine stops in the countryside and the driver orders them out at gunpoint. Doctor jumps the driver and punches him out. They both escape and search the car and find a painting by Amelia Ducart, a flower artist. When they visit her, Ducart tells them that the owner of the painting is Harrison Chase, who has never paid her for the painting. Chase orders Keeler to inject the pod with fixed nitrogen. When the Doctor and Sarah try to sneak into the mansion, they are captured and brought before Chase, who decides to show them around the mansion and his plant laboratory before he kills them. When Scorby escorts the Doctor and Sarah into the gardens to kill them, the two overpower him. Sarah escapes but is captured again. The Doctor rescues her, and in the confusion, a frond from the pod stings Keeler's arm. Keeler soon begins to transform into a crinoid, growing in strength, controlling nearby plants, and even Chase. The crinoid is starting to germinate, where it will spread its seeds across the world and create an earth of vegetation. The Seeds of Doom is one of Doctor Who's most accomplished dramas, as well as being one of the more bleak and grotesque stories. Despite its earthbound setting, the horror and gruesome factor is ranked up to 11, with plant life attacking animal life, strangulation by plants, and death by compost crushing. This is a story that I could easily watch in one sitting and never become bored by it, despite being 6 episodes long. The stakes are raised to their highest thanks to an excellent and intense performance from Tom Baker. Like Pyramids of Mars, we have the Doctor at his most brooding and alien because of the danger of the situation. The Doctor is not wasting any time here or kidding around and is rude to everyone he meets.
Are you okay dressed like that? You don't seem to notice the cold. I haven't come 10,000 miles to discuss the weather, Mr. Mobley. Can I see the sick man? If we don't find that pod before it germinates, it'll be the end of everything. Everything, you understand? Even your pension.
In fact, let's break down this scene. On paper, this is the Doctor and Sarah angry that no one will believe them of the attack on the Antarctic base, but the staging of this is fantastic. The way he carries the chair on his head, stumbling over his words, and not even bothering to sit on the chair, it just makes the scene all the more interesting thanks to Tom's performance. Because the Doctor is taking the threat so seriously, the audience is totally on his side and the behaviour is completely justified. You don't deny for a second that he is the hero, and Tom absolutely nails this aspect of the character. The Doctor also adopts a surprisingly violent streak in this serial. He punches the chauffeur which supposedly takes the man to hospital, twists Scorby's neck, jumps through a skylight to save Sarah, whilst thrashing a chair over Scorby, and even brandishes a pistol at one point. Again, all these actions I think are completely justifiable because we are in a situation where reasoning with greedy humans and an alien that is only doing what its biology intended won't cut it. However, that's not to say we don't see the Doctor's compassionate side. His anger at Scorby taking Sarah as a hostage is fantastic. You can tell how much the Doctor cares for Sarah, and there's this line as well.
How do you do? Have you met Miss Smith? She's my best friend.
It's such a small moment, but I absolutely love it. In just one line, they sum up how much the Doctor and Sarah mean to each other. But then in just a few seconds, the Doctor switches to being completely serious, demanding that Chase hands over the pod. It works so well thanks to Tom's performance and doesn't come across as a huge tonal shift. The narration that plays over scenes of the Krynoid hunting in the Antarctic snow is superb. Tom's voice really sells how dangerous this creature is, and is perfect foreshadowing for how even more powerful the Krynoid will become later on in the story. The Doctor is completely angry at humanity's greed and stupidity, evident by his conversation with Scorby in Part 5. The Doctor often finds these traits of humans tiresome at best, but because the stakes are so high, it racks the tension up to infinity. I love his disinterest in Scorby's rant about being a survivor. Yeah, he may have lived and seen a lot, but that's nothing compared to the giant Krynoid attacking the house. I even love his comedic moments, like the 360-degree turn when Scorby tells him to turn around. Tom Baker is on absolutely top form here, and throughout the season, the writers have made a conscious effort to make the Doctor more alien than ever before. I really think this is helped by how alien the villains have been this season. The majority of them are survivors, like the Zygons and Morbius, or the fear of the unknown, like the Antimatter or Sutekh. Throughout Season 13, the stakes were raised even higher than ever before, and Tom's charm and investment just makes the stories even more exceptional than the standard. Elizabeth Sladen is once again superb and has fantastic chemistry with Tom Baker. If you want a story that showcases everything what makes her fantastic, I point to this one. She's resourceful, witty, brave, and even saves the Doctor at one point. Just from seeing their on-screen actions together, you completely buy that these two are best friends. Even when she nearly dies in the base's explosion, she's more concerned with if the Doctor is safe than her own livelihood. The cliffhanger to episode 3 is really tense. Sarah is about to be tested by the Krynoid pod, and we already know what its effects are thanks to Winlet being infected by it, and we don't want the same thing to happen to Sarah. I like how her investigative journalism comes back as she's familiar with the flower painter Amelia Ducar, which inevitably leads them to Chase's mansion. Even when she's being hunted down by the guards, she still does her best to get help by warning Ducar that the Doctor and Sarah are trapped in Chase's mansion. I like how she's not beyond stupidity and presses the wrong button when the Doctor is in the compost machine. Sarah even tells Scorby off, claiming the Doctor is the better person because he's a man who has principles. Scorby doesn't even answer, but you know she's won the conversation. Later, Scorby compares the guards who desert the mansion to a bunch of women, yet Sarah's the one to go outside and see what the Krynoid is doing.
At a scream, obviously someone is in trouble.
Well, what can we do with that thing roaming about out there?
What was that you just said about women?
Oh, I love it. Her scene with Chase at the end is really brave. She tries to humour him despite being clearly insane and having no remorse for his action. She still stands courageous in the face of danger. Her chemistry with the Doctor just grew further in strength during this season, and it's completely adorable that they end the season laughing together. It's only a shame that they have 2 stories left after all this. The supporting cast in The Seeds of Doom is one of the very best that the series has ever had. They all feel well defined and developed people. Tony Beckley plays Harrison Chase, a multi-millionaire botanist who plans to use the crinoid for his own purposes. Beckley is superb as Chase and gives one of the most chilling performances in the series' history. For the most part, Chase rarely raises his voice, but usually has inhuman solutions to his problems. When told that the first pod was destroyed in Antarctica along with the crew, he's more disappointed that he couldn't have two pods rather than people dying. He views all humans as completely dispensable, as the crinoid is a unique creature. Even when Keeler is infected by it, he's simply fascinated by his transformation rather than scared. The way he plans to crush the Doctor into compost is also fantastic. Even in Murder, he's trying to help the plants win. Chase's very nature is even more revolting than the crinoid, as the plant is only doing what nature set out for it to do. However, I do like his scene with Amelia Ducar. You can see him trying to repress a lot of anger and doesn't have much patience with her, but gives her the money she wants so as not to arouse suspicion from anybody. When he becomes possessed by the crinoid in Part 5, Chase loses a lot of his emotional stability and becomes even more dangerous. The way he sits calmly surrounded by the plants, promising them a new era, may sound silly on paper, but Beckley completely sells it. I even like his comedic moment with his butler Hargreaves.
It's Mr. Keeler. Something's happening to that pod.
Why are you shouting, Hargreaves?
His demise is completely fitting for his character. Chase is killed and crushed by the compost machine, and is made part of the garden. He becomes one with nature. The irony is so delicious. John Challis plays Scorby, Chase's henchman. Now, I'm sure a lot of people will recognise John as Boise from Only Fools and Horses, but seeing him in both these productions, despite being two worlds away, shows how versatile an actor he really is. Scorby is a violent bully and is similar to Chase in how he doesn't care who gets killed or hurt in the crossfire, as long as he gets what he wants. Scorby doesn't feel in power unless he has a weapon in his hands, making him a dangerous and unpredictable thug. However, his character development in the final two episodes feels genuine. He helps the Doctor and Sarah to try and defeat the crinoid, but he doesn't reform or instantly become a better person. He's still the same character who cares for no one but himself, but now he's the one who isn't in power and is being viewed as disposable by Chase. Like the crinoid, his ultimate goal is to survive, and he doesn't care who gets hurt. Even the Doctor tells him that bullets and bombs aren't the answer to everything. By the end, his survivor's instinct takes over and he's killed by not listening to the Doctor and drowns in a pond by the crinoid. Like Chase, his demise feels very fitting. Mark Jones plays reluctant scientist Keeler, who eventually becomes infected by the crinoid. Keeler is the complete opposite to Scorby and a total pacifist. One thing I like that shows the difference between the two men is their body language. In the base, Scorby holds the gun casually, which tells you how used to using guns he is. Compare that to Keeler when he guards the Doctor and Sarah and he has the gun raised with his arm fully straight. You can tell he doesn't want to use it, but he's maintaining the illusion that he will use it if necessary. It's ironic how the most pacifist character becomes the most destructive plant in the universe. His crinoid transformation is absolutely horrific. He seethes with anger to Sarah that it might have been her instead, and rages at Sarah for refusing to help him. The physical and psychological effects the crinoid has on Keeler is brutal, and is so horrific to watch. Sylvia Coleridge plays painter Amelia Ducar. She's a delightfully scatty character that provides much needed levity to this otherwise dark story.
Harrison chased them in there. Good Lord, he never paid me.
It's terrific stuff. Kenneth Gilbert plays Dunbar, who initially informs Chase about the pod, but slowly but surely realises that everything is going too far, and is eventually killed by the crinoid. Despite seeing the error of his ways, he's still punished for his actions. It's a really cynical view, but even in Doctor Who, all of our actions have consequences. Seymour Green plays Chase's butler Hargreaves. This is a character that could have been cut entirely, but Green really brings this character to life. He seems to be the only straight man in Chase's mansion amidst all the madness. I love his go-with-the-flow attitude to everything that occurs. He's completely fine with Chase taking photos of the crinoid and experimenting on Keeler, but when Scorby orders him to seal the doors and windows, he just goes with it.
Well, listen, I'll posted lookouts, but they're not going to stay very long. Get over to the workshop, get some timber. We've got to board up all these ground floor windows.
Oh, if you say so.
That line delivery is the icing on the cake. Hubert Reeves plays John Stevenson, the lead botanist at the Antarctic base. He's the one who places an ultraviolet lamp on the first pod, which eventually awakens the crinoid. Despite his best efforts to help the Doctor, he's still killed by it, even though he was the one who unwittingly brought it back to life. Michael McStay plays zoologist Derek Moberly and plans to amputate Winlet's arm to stop the infection. I like how despite not having much experience, the Doctor says you must help yourselves, and agrees to do it, but he is still killed by the Krynoid. Despite only appearing in 2 episodes, the Antarctic crew feel like real people that have their arcs resolved in 2 episodes, brought to life by great performances. Sadly, the weak link for me is the inclusion of UNIT. The beloved family feel of the Pertwee era is now long gone at this point, and they've just been relegated to generic army men. This would be the final appearance of UNIT until Battlefield in Season 26. Then again, this doesn't feel like they were trying to give UNIT a massive send-off, but more or less a means to an end. The production values are fantastic in this story thanks to cinematic direction from Douglas Camfield. The snowy landscapes of Antarctica look fantastic. You almost feel that the production team really flew out to the South Pole. The mix of live-action snow and visual effects really helps to sell the location. The grounds covering Chase's country mansion are also brilliant. It gives Chase's house such an atmospheric feel. The autumn location work gives the chase scenes a very sumptuous feel, and is a story definitely to watch at Halloween time. The Krynoid effects itself have held up for the most part. When it's in its humanoid form, it looks great. The way the human face becomes embedded in the plant form is horrific, and it looks like it could kill a human with its bare hands, or vines. Sadly, when the Krynoid does become larger, I think this is where it shows its age, as it tends to shuffle about rather slowly. Luckily, it isn't on screen for too long. However, I think the stop motion effects of when it attacks the house in Part 6 is pretty effective, and I wonder if for the eventual Season 13 Blu-ray release, the visual effects would get a CGI update. What works so well about the Krynoid is how it starts off as a small seed, and ends up growing and growing until it becomes a very big problem. It not only grows in size, but is able to control surrounding plants, and will soon infect the entire planet when it sends out seed pods in its germination phase. The Krynoid is one of the most terrifying enemies the Doctor has ever faced, and is just superb to watch. It's one of the best one-off villains the series has ever had. Jeffrey Burgin returns to provide a spine-tingling score to the story, and like Terror of the Zygons, is absolutely brilliant. One of my favourite tracks is when Dunbar is killed by the Krynoid. I love the use of drums whilst Dunbar is looking for it, but the music changes when he eventually sees it, indicating that the hunter has become the hunted. The music used when Sarah enters the cottage is straight out of a horror film. The use of strings and the flute just brings the atmosphere to life. I love how the music gets louder and louder towards the end of episode 2 as the clock ticks down and comes to a stop when the bass explodes. It sounds utterly gorgeous and racks the tension up for the scene. I find it criminal that Jeffrey didn't do any more stories after this one, as the man had exceptional music talent. If you want to listen to his music individually, you can find it on the DVD release as an isolated score. Alternatively, you can find it in a rare CD with Terror of the Zygons, but only buy if you're willing to put down the cash for it. Or you can find certain tracks of the score on the 50th anniversary CD collection. Seeds of Doom is more or less a flawless Doctor Who adventure, packed with an excellent script, scary moments, sublime performances from the cast, and superb direction that lifts the production to stand head over heels of other stories of its time. The Doctor and Sarah Jane are on top form and dazzle their way through the adventure. The music is utterly gorgeous, and despite being 6 episodes, it's a story you could easily watch in one go and never feel bored by it. The monster and villain are one of the best that the series has ever had, and it's an absolute blast to watch from start to finish. The Seeds of Doom is held in high regard by many fans, and after watching it again I can definitely see why. It deserves all the praise in the world, and I simply adore it.